It is, of course, a great pleasure for me to wish you welcome to this roundtable discussion on the image of women politicians in the media, a theme of great interest and importance for women and media, but of course also for men and for the general public at large. I would like, first of all, here to introduce the panelists that we have with us here today. Mrs. Mrinal Pandey. Then comes Mr. Ken Cooper, who is the Washington Post's South Asia Bureau Chief. The third person is Mrs. Anita Pratap, the New Delhi Bureau Chief of CNN. Then follows the four politicians on the panel, but as I said, some of them might as well represent the media world, have experiences from that. That is very much the case with Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, who is president of the Women's Campaign Fund, which is the United States' oldest and biggest non-partisan political action committee supporting the pro-choice women candidates running for public offices. Mr. Virendra Kumar is also a former journalist and is now a member of the parliament here in India. He has been a national executive member of the Socialist Party, SSP, JP, and Janata Dal since 1970. Dr. Hosseini is a former member of parliament in Benin and was also Minister of Labor, Employment, and Social Affairs in her country. Mrs. Hosseini has always been devoted to social issues and particularly to the situation of women. And lastly, Miguel Angel Martinez is a prominent socialist parliamentarian from Spain and for many years an active member and president of the Spanish group of the Inter-parliamentary Union. He has also been member of the IPU's executive committee and president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. He is renowned for his anti-fascist activities during the Franco era in Spain. Maybe I should also introduce myself too. My name is Birgitta Dahl, and I will be the moderator of this roundtable discussion. I am now the Speaker of the Swedish Riksdag, and I have been an active politician in local politics, in parliament and government, and in international politics for more than 30 years. And that means, of course, that I have a long personal experience, positive and negative, of being exposed in media. It is a fact, and I need not tell you this, but it has to be repeated, that women are grossly underrepresented all over the world in parliament, in government, in private and public top management, in research, in all important decision-making institutions. It is also a fact that the great challenges of our time, the topics of the World Summits in the 90s, attaining a responsible, sustainable, and democratic development and a better future, cannot be dealt with without the successful contribution of us all. In this struggle, we need the knowledge, competence, and experience of both women, empowered women, and men, equal men, acting in parity and partnership. I think that that aspect is extremely important. But today there are only 5 of the single or lower chambers of national parliaments in the world that have a proportion of 30% or more women parliamentarians. Only 5. The figure of 30% is in research and in experience on equal representation considered to be a magic level that creates such a large minority that women can really have an impact on politics, on their own conditions, in their own capacity, without having to imitate men. Looking at the world at large, with an average of 11% women MPs, I can only say that we still have a very long way to go. And it might be interesting to discuss here today if this low representation is a vicious circle. If women politicians are less and differently exposed in media because there are so few of us. In Sweden, we have the highest representation of women in parliament in the world, 44% at present. And in the government, the proportion is 50 to 50%. And do these figures also have an impact on the media image of politicians? I would say yes, according to our experience. Women in Sweden are no longer rare exceptions in decision-making bodies. Thus, we have developed from being interesting but rare creatures to being accepted as normal and usual politicians, being interviewed and focused on as politicians, not as representatives for a minority. If, for instance, the foreign minister is a woman and has a dozen of female colleagues in the cabinet, you have a good case, a much better case, that she will be interviewed in her own capacity as foreign minister, not as a woman. On the other hand, we have all experienced, I believe, situations where we, as women politicians, have been described as aggressive, even hysteric, where men acting likewise would have been characterized in media also as conscious and strong-willed. And women in top positions often feel that they are exposed differently from men. I would like to invite Mrs. Pratap on behalf of the media representatives here to start off, please.
Going on to the issue of media, I do not agree that men and women are treated differently, and I say that from my perspective. I have only been a professional journalist when none of these things matter. It doesn't matter whether it's an Indian or a Pakistani, a man or a woman, these things just don't matter. It's the merit of the story that matters. And if you look at India right now, just if you were to take a snap poll and find out who are the women politicians who have been getting maximum media publicity in the last 1 year or so, I don't think you would find a differing viewpoint as you saw earlier when our views were asked. By and large, you would say that the two people, if you were to ask people who are the two people who got maximum amount of publicity, you would find it is Phulan Devi, who is a former female bandit, the bandit queen as she is described, and you have Maneka Gandhi, who is an environmentalist. Because the media has its own logic and compulsions. We have to go back to journalism school where it is the extraordinary that makes the story. It is not the ordinary. If there is power supply uninterrupted for 1 week, you do not find that to be news. If there is a power breakdown for 12 hours in a day, that's front page. Phulan Devi's is an extraordinary story, so she gets the publicity. Hers is a classic example of truth being stranger than fiction, and no wonder that today there are films and books being written about her because her life is so extraordinary, and that is what the media does. It picks out the extraordinary. We are not here to win brownie points with the media or with the world. If you believe in your cause, at some point, if you are convinced that you are doing something right, unmindful of whether it is bouquets or brickbats that's going to come your way, the media will come to you because you stand tall, and the first thing, the media then notices you, and the media will come to you. Thank you.
I think they have a vision which is openly macho in many cases, and very frequently they give too much importance to the physical aspect and the private life of women as compared to their treatment of men. Perversely, mischievously, this is reflected, and they seem to imply within quotes that this has a negative influence on their private life, and there again this goes against their political life. In other words, their political life damages their private life. This is the picture that is drawn. The media are less indulgent, less forgiving towards women than towards men. May I conclude this essential thinking? Of course, I'm not saying that the media are the only ones or even the main ones that are the culprits and responsible for the position of women in this shortfall in democracy is an insult to reason, a fracture in democracy, and above all, an unpardonable waste of human resources which humanity cannot afford. The media does not help to overcome this defect. On the contrary, I'm saying this not to bother anybody or to be provocative with regard to the media or the professional media people. We need these media, these professional media people, absolutely. We require them. I realize that without them, we Democrats would never be able to win a battle, our battle for democracy, a battle which we need to win and want to win, with the perspective of cooperation, which I think is essential to win this battle. It's a battle we're all involved in, all us Democrats, whether we be media people, politicians, or members of society, as we all are. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
One of the aspects that affects the way the media treat women political actors is who the media are. And most places in the world are predominantly male. Now, for those who are committed to seeing more women in politics, the good news is that this is changing. In the United States, it's changing rapidly. Right now, 2/3 of the students in journalism schools are female. And I would expect within a generation that the newsrooms of America will become feminized. And I would expect that the priorities in the news agenda will change. And how the news is portrayed, I think, will also change. I also understand from some talks with editors in India that there are an increasing number of women entering the media in India, the largest democracy. So I think who the media are is very important to how this plays out. I don't want to go on too long here, but I will say one thing about racism and sexism as it concerns politics. In the United States, at least, there's a place to make one distinction between racism and sexism. Both of them involve discrimination. But in the United States, being non-white is also a social disadvantage. And being a woman may not always be a social disadvantage. In fact, you can be a woman and be very advantaged and then go into the workplace in the United States and other countries and get discriminated against. So there's a couple of components to what race means in the United States. In terms of politics and the media, I mean, in the United States, African-American politicians and non-white politicians have some different problems. They would complain they get too much attention of the wrong kind, and that there's an over-scrutiny of their financial accounts, their public participation. Many of them think there's a conspiracy by the media and prosecutors to get African-American politicians out of office. And there's some evidence to support that. And I don't think women experience that. The overriding phenomenon, I think, for women and their experience with the media is that they get ignored, and what they say doesn't count as much, and they don't get quoted as much, and they don't get on TV as much. Thank you.
If you have money, and if you look at the races in the United States where people won, it was 90% of the time where there was more money, except in one case, and that is if you are covered. The media makes up for a lot of the difference. And in my race, for instance, I knew that we were a good story. We have 11 children. So, and I was the only woman in the race in my state. We were covered a lot, and that helped a tremendous amount make up for the difference in fundraising. There's a woman that a lot of people covered this year by the name of Carolyn McCarthy. She was in a district that was pretty much an urban district. Her husband had been killed in a massacre on the subway. The gentleman who represented her district decided to vote to repeal the gun ban, the automatic weapons ban. Not a very good idea. She entered the race and got a tremendous amount of coverage. She was able to raise some money, and a lot of money, but what was essential was that she was covered, that she got this extraordinary story over and over and over again in the media. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that there's a very strange marriage and love-hate relationship between the media and politicians. I found going on the other side of the microphone was a fascinating experience. You gave up control. You had, having come from the media, you thought you knew where the reporter was going. Often you did not, so it was a disadvantage. To the advantage, having been on television, I was not as afraid of the media, perhaps although perhaps in many cases I should have been. I was stunned at how much time it took up. I was absolutely baffled by some stories that they thought were important, and I couldn't believe that they kept on calling me on a story that I really thought had no importance. But I don't want to take up any more time.
It is a very welcome phenomena that more women are entering our media, but this is happening largely in the English language media, which is urban and which caters to the upper middle classes, and therefore girls and women, as the white women in American society may accrue a lot of advantages denied to a normal non-white man. Similarly, in India, an upper caste woman from an upper caste middle class family may accrue a lot of advantages which are denied to a lower caste rural man. Therefore, the presence of women should not really lead one to believe that things are going to change in a very big way. This fact hit me in the face when we were putting our media body together, Women's Press Corps, and I was quite surprised that there was a lot of enthusiasm in the language press, though the presence of women there was much smaller, but they had all come up the hard way. Their families had blocked them, their employers had been quite occasionally hostile to them, but still they had stuck on. And therefore, I think that media also has to develop a kind of, particularly women in the media, have to see how networking is also in the long run good for them. Because within the media structures also, women are coming in large numbers, but they are not coming to areas where decisions are made. Most of them are sedimented at desks. They are answerable to male bosses, and very often the prioritization of the news takes place at the desk of the male editor. And so therefore, I think there is a greater need for interaction and networking between women parliamentarians. The reverse of this is also very often true. When a woman parliamentarian or a female minister wants to break an important bit of news, she may very well call a male journalist or contact an editor who's, with few exceptions, always a male, and put out her viewpoint. She has a better chance of being heard and given a proper coverage if the person covering her understands exactly what she's talking about. But that is something which cannot be ordered. As Anita said, media does not create reality. Media reports on it. And sometimes media by its very nature reports on reality, which is very, very strange. And I'm very glad our political reality is so strange and getting stranger by the day, that we will perhaps end up networking women in the media and women in politics, not out of a great feeling for being a crusader, but out of sheer compulsions of survival. Thank you very much.
Destroying the image of women, that is an extremely easy thing. All you have to do is present women as children, mere children. Let me give you examples. The example of Madame Edith Cresson. She was, as you know, a French prime minister. Men couldn't put up with that, and you saw how long she lasted. 5 months exactly, and that was the end of her. And then President François Mitterrand changed his prime minister. When men are against you, they use the media against you. And as most of the media have a macho tendency, women are represented in an unfavorable light. A second example now, Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was a very firm lady, an iron lady, as the media said. Why did they never use that adjective, iron, in speaking of a man? In fact, the media even went so far as to say that at the time when she was prime minister, she was the only man in government. In other words, there is always a very negative way of presenting women, even when they are successful. Now, this doesn't apply everywhere. In Africa, my continent, and in my small country, Benin, this applies fully. First of all, media means money, and secondly, women do not hold power in decision-making bodies in the field of media. Thank you very much.
For the first time, after maybe Buddha 5,000 years, 2,500 years after, there is a national dialogue now. Not only of women, what should be done about them, how to treat them, just as to look after children, to produce children, only just the factories, or they are the wheels of the chariot of the nation. Only when there are two wheels, the chariot can run. If the one wheel is small, other is big, it won't run. So the question is very simple. Here, the media, not only media for that fact, I'm close, not only media for that fact, every sector, every segment you go, women are discriminated. And there are some examples sometimes you see as a shining star somewhere, where some people do things very courageously, and I thank them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, as we move on to the audience, I would like us also to discuss what we do believe could be done in order to promote parity and to promote female participation in politics and the role of media here, including maybe the role of some kind of affirmative action, including training female politicians on how to deal with media. I think we have to be very concrete. And I would like you to come up with your views and proposals. We will have to be very short in order to give the chance to as many as possible to speak. So I would like the leader of the Indian delegation, Mrs. McCarthy, to start off.
In my opinion, in India, the reporting of the parliamentary activities of politicians are biased, not only against women, but for other peer reasons also. Whether this is correct. Secondly, I would like to know whether media also has some responsibility towards projecting positive contribution of women politicians, taking it that they are women being the half of the population. As far as my suggestion is concerned, I think we can begin at least with Parliament, each Parliament setting up one PR group, particularly for disabled parliamentarians, that is women here. Whether it is possible, I think that should be done, because individual PR definitely is connected with other interests, which some people may not like to do.
I also have here Madame Pivnenko from the Russian Federation, who would like to take the floor.
I would like to make the following proposal. If you approve it, if you, Mr. Martiniuk, when he spoke, he said that we feel the lack of prominent leaders, women leaders. I don't think he was correct saying it. We can use the opportunities of Inter-parliamentary union and of all countries that are members to this union in assisting and creating such an organization that would help and assist mass media in different countries in portraying women of different countries, of prominent politicians in different countries.
Hectic intervention is not effective and not efficient. At last, and finally, the continuous support of efficient females working in the media field is by itself a major help of defending women's rights. Their good introduction of female profile to the public is by itself a good introduction to political life. Thank you.
I find among all you delegates one common tendency, and that is a very high level of expectation from the media. Sure, the media should be responsible, but when it comes to spreading education or nutrition or improving literacy, it is not the media's job. That is the role of the politicians, the bureaucrats, and the non-governmental organizations. The role of the media is to report and facilitate change, but they cannot really do more than that. I think expectations have to be pegged at a more realistic level. To really bring about change, to improve women's participation in politics and in the parliament, I think two things have to be done. Number one, there has to be greater level of cleanliness in politics. One of the biggest deterrents to women coming into politics is that politics is seen as a very dirty, wicked world. How many women would want to get into that? How many professionals want to get into it? So number one, if there is political cleanliness, I think more women would be encouraged to come in. The second is the home. The home is where the biggest change can happen. The empowerment of the girl child. Often the girl child is discriminated not by the father but by the mother. If we can have a situation where a girl child gets the right nutrition, the right education, is given the opportunities to compete, she is on an equal footing in society to compete not only for jobs, not only for her rights, but for seats in parliament as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the floor goes to the representative of Malaysia.
It is in fact very important for us politicians, particularly women politicians, to understand media. And I would like to agree with Madam Chair that we ought to have a media strategy workshop, make it compulsory for all women politicians to undergo this. I would like to suggest that in that media strategy workshop, women learn about the basics of a media plan, how to make press releases, learn about tips on paste up of published articles, how to give interviews, learn about print tools, electronic media, how to arrange and handle press conferences, how to prepare press kits, and lastly, but certainly not the least, how to make speeches and presentations. At the end of the media strategy workshop, women politicians will then find their public voice. Thank you.
Our experience from the Swedish Parliament is that being a woman member of Parliament is not the extraordinary. With 44% women MPs, this is on the contrary, the ordinary, the normal. The same goes for government with 50% of the ministers as women. Does that mean then that these differences in picturing women is dead in the Swedish media? No way. I can tell you that our experience is that they are vivid, but there is a need of an additional extraordinary factor for these attitudes to come through. For example, when a woman MP becomes a party leader, which is quite rare in Sweden, or if a very, very young woman becomes elected to parliament, then these attitudes are applied all over again. Then they are covering her if she has red, high-heeled slingback shoes, or if she has had a haircut recently, or if she is appearing in a very decolleted dress, or something like that. So the strategy that must be taken is to make it normal with women parliamentarians of all ages in decision-making, in all decision-making bodies. Then it's not extraordinary anymore, and then if the normal becomes what is covered, then you will cover what they are saying, not how they look. Thank you.
I wanted to agree with what the Malaysia representative has said. She described almost exactly the training workshops that we have been doing with women in different countries, women politicians on the media, but also to add to it that what we do is we train the journalists and the politicians together, because then both understand that there is a difference and how to interact together. So I just wanted to say that there is such training going on. Thank you.
We have trainings all over the country, and one of, obviously, the most popular but the most intense workshops is in the media. That is, how not to be afraid of it, how to embrace it, which is very difficult. Try to understand what the media is looking for. What is your message is often a question. And it isn't a message that we're talking about within the next couple of weeks or months. It's a lifelong message. How do you want people to see you? It's really quite fascinating and a never-changing one.
Media do not take advantage of this opportunity of contributing to the consolidation of democracy using women. They do not try to awaken consciousness of the importance of women in society in general, and the importance of the role of women politicians. They do not take advantage of this. I want to make this point because I entirely agree with what was said this morning and what the IPU has been dealing with for years, that democracy is not entirely representative. There's something lacking if half of the population is left out of it. Thank you. We think media and television has a great influence on the political, social and cultural life. Media do not argue. They're content with narrating facts, and they have a decisive role when it's a matter of consolidating traditional values and taking a non-discriminatory approach. The content of the political message is increasingly undissociable from the person. Whether it's a woman or a man presenting it, it's determinant. When there's a woman presenting the facts, it automatically turns to the position of women in society. So politicians are a role model for women interested in politics, so as to address a public of women which is as large as possible and to get them to motivated in politics. Women must communicate messages, the contents of which are made up by women for women. And this is the reply to your other question. You can only get this done by the media, so politicians must have an increased media-based policy. I have proposed a statement on the subject, and this will be available in French and English. Thank you for your attention.
The imperative that's posed by the violent realities of women's life requires a national and an international effort by all individuals, institutions, and organizations across society. And so I'm pushing very strongly for the idea that we have a partnership between men and women, not just in politics, but in all institutions. Thank you. My colleague will address the second part.
So could I just quickly address an issue which has not been brought up at all this afternoon? That is the key issue of restructuring government communications. Nobody has talked about government communications departments internationally, nationally, provincially, locally. And I really think that one needs to focus on the issue of the commitment of governments, both national, provincial, and local, to gender equality can indeed, to a very large degree, be precisely monitored through their own communication networks. So the who, what, when, where, how, why of gender equality policies and processes and programs, if any, and their outreach and responses can be looked at, and thought perhaps can be given to making funding to state and public broadcasters made contingent to the development of public policy and education programs directly related to the improvement of the quality and life of status of women nationally, regionally, and locally. And this could lead to encouraging healthy interaction and debate, dialogue between not only men and women politicians, but it would have the spin-off into the media.
The appearance of female politicians in the media of the various member countries, to see whether the media still show the role of women of the Middle Ages or at the beginning of the century, or whether they show the new developments and show women at the beginning of the second millennium. And this, I think, might help us to get a positive and a negative hit list in the course of time. So I would be very grateful if we could come back to proposals of this kind. Thank you.
One last comment, and that is with what Mr. Ken Cooper said. The good news that there are now 2/3 of women journalists students. I must say, as a former professor, university professor myself in this area many years ago, this was also the case 20 years ago in many countries, and it did not change very much the situation, because what still remains is that those who decide about the content in the media and the policies are still mostly men. Thank you.
The little support from the media trying to break discriminatory patterns doesn't depend on professionals who are ethical and who may be good, but on the owners of these media or the advertising agencies who are their main customers and on which they depend. It's to them that we should address this thinking, but a critical appraisal from all parliamentarians. We have to take action. Our silence might mean we'd be ignored, but the media have to fulfill an essential role in the changes we can expect in the next millennium, the balance which all of humanity claims. Thank you.
I would like to call for partnership with the media, the women and the media. This will help to promote their image. Secondly, I think we need to train women more in terms of public speaking and presentation of facts for all the good work that they are doing. Lastly, I would like to say that as the media works in our countries, the majority is in English. I think we need to go beyond English and French and Spanish, which are languages that have brought into our countries. We should do more in our own languages and promote all what we are doing as women. In conclusion, Madam Chair, success for women will be enhanced if a positive alliance with the media is formed, as I think they are critical to promoting women in politics and portraying the correct image and the good work and the good nature of women. Thank you.
I would suggest that we all try, based on this discussion, to work on this matter, both in our national parliaments, in our own societies, in a dialogue with the media, and that IPU takes it up as a practical work, as it has with other important aspects of the art of parity and partnership, which I do believe we all share. And I would like to thank the members of the panel for your outstanding contribution. I would like to thank all of you who have been able to contribute to the discussion, and I hope it is also accepted that it was not possible to give room for everybody who wished to talk.